Good afternoon, good morning, and good day, everyone who's joined us today. And we are more than happy to have Laksh Raghunathan join us. And it's so important to measure everything, but we want to measure both matters. Laksh I've known for many, many years, and we've been in the project circle for very long. But Laksh is doing some awesome things with TaxTop, and I'll give you an overview of some of Laksh's work at TaxTop. She's currently the Director of Product Operations at TaxTop Technologies, and they are in the news. If you haven't heard about TaxTop, go to their website. But today we've got TaxTop celebrity here, Laksh, so you don't have to worry. Yeah, I've known Laksh. She's been a software engineer, she's been into product development, product consulting, coaching enterprises, and she's well into Agile and DevOps. If it's DevOps, I know you can always contact Laksh. And she's very product oriented. So most of the things we'll be hearing will be from Laksh's experience, and it will be very practical, unlike people who will be talking about things from a theoretical viewpoint. She does the practice, she's in the role, and we are more than grateful to have you, Laksh. So Laksh, we want to hear all the nuggets you've got for us. Let's go ahead with the session.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me and allowing me to talk about a topic that is quite close to my heart as well. So we'll just kick on. Yeah. You already have heard a little bit about me. There's my LinkedIn link, and I'm always happy to chat with anyone if you have any questions there as well. So thought I'll mention that. Right. I think one of the first thing I love to start with is by that reminder. It's one of my favorite quotes that just because you can measure something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you the insights that you need, right? So it's always good to think about what do you really want to achieve by measuring something. Let's take an example. Here's a chart of Sam, who's been doing a few weekly walking miles, and there's the trajectory that's being followed. If I just showed you that little chart there and asked you, how is Sam doing? I bet the answers that I'm going to get is going to be quite varied, because at the end of the day, it really depends. Depends on what Sam is trying to achieve. If her goal is to improve fitness, she's absolutely doing great because she's increased the miles that she's doing. She's able to be more active. So yes, everything is going great. What if her goal was to run a marathon, and that's next week? While she's doing okay in terms of walking the miles, we're not seeing any information about how she's been doing about the runs. And so it's perhaps not looking great for the marathon next week, and she probably needed a little bit more time. What if her goal was to climb a mountain like Kilimanjaro? We don't have enough information, do we? It doesn't tell you, is she doing elevations when she does these walks? Is she carrying a pack and so forth? I guess the point I'm trying to make is before you put any sort of dashboard together, you need to understand what is the goal. The people that are going to view that dashboard, what are the questions that they're trying to get answered? What is the insight that they're trying to achieve? It's the same thing when it comes to creating metrics that are aligned to the business, that the business wants to look at. Understanding where they're coming from and what's important to them is the first step. When you look at organizations are structured quite hierarchically, and they're optimized for teams and functions. And what I mean by that is if you're in a slightly bigger organization, you'll see that you have your product teams, you have your project management teams, you have development teams, you might have a completely different testing team, your operations is led by another team, and a lot of these could be located in different places. And what that means is when it comes to measuring work, these sort of metrics that you look at are are sort of relevant to that context, to the team context. Burn up, burn down charts are absolutely important for the product teams. You look at story points to be able to understand how you're managing your capacity, how you're working towards the goals for your sprints and so forth. Your defect ratio is going to be important to the testing teams to understand how they're doing. Your deploys per day, your mean time to resolve or recover, they're all absolutely relevant, but they're looking at a functional context. When it comes to showing the progress to the business, however, you lose a little bit of, it becomes overwhelming because it doesn't quite align to what they're looking for. So let's step back and think about, what does the business care about, right? They're thinking about things like, how do I satisfy my customer needs? How quickly can I deliver value? Am I investing in the right areas, and do I need to pivot investments? So notice that the key there is the focus on the customer. They're focused on how they can deliver, how we're as a team or as a system, as a company, delivering to their relevant customers. So when you go back to that structure, and when you have to think about value delivery, it transcends the teams itself. It has to go horizontal. You have to think across teams to be able to look at it from a customer lens. By completing a testing, the customer does not derive the value right away. The value to the customer and that journey that it follows goes all the way from your ideation to operation. And what I mean by that is, when you start with something that you need to deliver to the customer, you go through that stage, and it's cyclical, it's continuous. You take in a feature that you need to develop to the customer. You then develop it, release it, and you operate it. And then you do have to come back again to make sure that you are delivering against that value, and how would you need to make changes to it. And by that, what you're looking at is some of the activities that you're doing. They all fall within that criteria. So what you want to be able to look at is understand who my customer is, apply that product lens as opposed to functional and team lens, if you will. How might you understand what products do you have and who is your customer? You could be a business-focused product, something like a online portal, a mobile app, a point-of-sale system where you're directly interacting with the customer, and that might be what you're delivering within your IT team or a technology team. But you might also be delivering something that is internal, a SDK, perhaps, that is being delivered to a team that then pull that value for a business product. Or you might be a IT for IT team. Your team might be managing the DevOps pipeline that every product and every application within the company uses. So thinking about it from that product lens and understanding who your customer is, who is dictating value, who is creating, or who is dictating what value you create, who prioritizes what, who's paying for it. Asking these questions will enable you to think about the business and what metrics or what outcomes they might care about. And it could be anything from number of visits to a particular, or usage of a particular tool or an application, number of API calls made, or even things like the customer NPS, or internally the turnover rate. So understanding that gives you a sense for how do you affect any of these outcomes. So that's sort of the first step. Once you get to the point where you've understood what the outcomes are that the business cares about, the next step is to pull the metrics to align to them. Now, you see two examples of a bank statement. One is a sort of a summary view. You've got another one, which is a transaction view. If I ask you which one you prefer, I suspect it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If all you want to do is, can I make this withdrawal and do I have enough money? The first one is good enough for you. But if the question you want to answer is, I need to reduce my expenditure, and what might I cut from my usual spending, you will probably look at a more transactional view to understand how I'm spending right now and what might I be able to save on. So metrics are exactly like that. When it comes to identifying what, to relating to what outcomes you want to be measuring against, our standard software delivery metrics tend to be too detailed. They're like that transactional view where they're very focused on processes and they're very team oriented, if you will. So what ends up happening is there's just a lot of noise. A lot of dashboards look like cockpit controls sometimes because there are so many different metrics, you don't know what to focus on. So what you might want to do is create that elevated view, something like that summary view with flow metrics, which is focused on value creation at a product level. At the end of the day, the two metrics are absolutely important. You don't want to do away with your standard software delivery metrics because they give you a lot of insights at a team level. They measure what you're doing day to day. They are optimized for your daily activities. And you might also focus on things like capacity and utilization, things that flow metrics don't necessarily look at. What flow metrics focus on consider them as a summary metrics, and they're overarching. So they're not just focused on individual teams and activities, but they're looking at between the time when we decided to do something and when we delivered that value, how are we doing that? And how does that align to what the business is trying to achieve from that product? It's optimized for flow. It's focused on outcomes. And more importantly, it's focused on things like predictability and efficiency and ability to deliver value. So it's very focused on value, and it's agnostic to teams and functions. So a lot of these concepts, again, especially the need to shift the mindset when it comes to delivering technology to a product mindset comes from this book called Project Product by Dr. McKirsten. And he's also provided a framework. Again, this is available to anyone through Collective Commons. It's a framework that enables you to think about and creates a sort of a way to pivot to a more product mindset. And the core there is flow metrics. And notice that it's always related to business results. They go hand in hand. And it's not a lot of metrics. There are 5 metrics that are very focused on all of the work that you're doing within technology, which will elevate every other metrics that you have. It can be derived from that. It's very relatable to your software delivery metrics and aligned to business outcomes. So at the end of the day, your flow metrics, much like a doctor would take vital signs, your flow metrics gives you a pulse on what's happening within your product value stream. Flow velocity will answer questions like how much value is being delivered within a particular period? How well am I doing against what the business wants me to achieve? Flow efficiency looks at how much wait times and active time do I have across the system, and where can I optimize them? Where should I put more energy to optimize so I get the best results out? Flow time focuses on how long does it take from request to release. So look at that entire picture, not just within your IT or development backlog, all the way from the time when you decided to take on an initiative, the planning process, the development, the testing, all the way to release. Look at it across that space. Load looks at how much items do you have as a value stream on your plate. Is there a lot of context switching going on? Is there just too much for the number of people you have on your value stream to work on items? Is work going stale? So answers questions around how you're managing your load. And finally, distribution focuses on how are you allocating your capacity across all of the different types of work. It abstracts that out to 4 types: features, defects, risks, and debt. And by doing that, it focuses not just on features, but also internal work like technical debt and risk. So being able to look at it at that level is absolutely important. And at every point, when you pull those metrics out, you also want to be able to relate back to the business outcomes all the time. So you look at them in parallel and are able to gauge how you're moving the needle on the outcomes as you change or as your metrics evolve. So that's absolutely key. If you can do it in real time, perfect, because then you get a much better sense rather than looking at data which is perhaps a month old, right? So the more real time it is, the better for you. And all of these can be derived from your existing tools, existing metrics. You just need to be able to synthesize that across. Another key thing to remember also is one pitfall you always fall into is when you deliver something to the customer, it doesn't matter how long you took to deliver. At the end of the day, the value that they receive does not correlate to size. You might have made a very small change, which could add a lot more value to a customer, even if you spent about a day creating that particular piece of work, or you could have spent 3 months. But at the end of the day, the value is not in the customer's fingertips until they receive it. And at the end of the day, you can only do one thing at a time. So it's the focus isn't on size. The focus should be on what you're prioritizing against your business outcomes and the number of items that you deliver, because every one of those needs to have a value that is delivered. It could be a feature, it could be a defect, it could be a risk. But as long as that is in the hands of the customer who can then reap the benefits of it, that's key. And finally, you can't rely on one metric. It's absolutely essential to ensure that when you're looking at a particular metric, you're able to get the same insight by looking at others as well. So rather than focus on one metric that you want to move, focus on trends. Trends are a better sense, give you a better sense for how you're doing, because at the end of the day, every value stream is different. What a good number for one value stream may not be the same, may not be the right answer or the right level for another value stream. So trends are more important. And then the other thing to focus is on impact. That's sort of a quick overview of why it's important to look at metrics when it comes to business, to be able to elevate that at a system level rather than teams. So hopefully it's helped challenge you to think about a little bit more across teams and across value streams and align to the business. I want to give you some time in case there are any questions. So that's my last slide. If there's one slide you want to take away from here, here they are. These are the 3 sort of points I wanted to drive here, is that if you want to measure something, start with what outcomes are desired. And especially because if it is for business visibility, use something like flow metrics, which speaks in their context, as opposed to just reusing existing metrics, which are more aligned to the teams. And make sure you're anchoring them to the business outcomes and focusing on trends, which I think is absolutely key. With that, I will pause and I'm happy to take any questions.
Laksh, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking, insightful, and storytelling presentation on data. Usually when you attend events or when you hear people present on data, it's not as captivating as what you've put together. You've made it still insightful, and there's so much I can take out of this session. But let me give the chance to everyone so that they can also ask questions. But I've really gained so much from this, from the presentation, and I have some questions. Has anyone got questions for Laksh? Okay, I'll start it off. Laksh, you talked about metrics. And in terms of metrics, when you are putting together metrics, it really requires that we bring the business people on the journey. And business people will always say, oh, can we have X metrics? Can we look at Y metrics? At what point should we start engaging the business when we start thinking about such metrics? Is it at strategy point, or is it when we're building the system, or is it when the product is with the customer?
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, the business needs visibility even before the customer has the product, right? Because they're investing energy, time, investment into building whatever it is that you are building. It could be an internal product. It could be as something as simple as we're going to put a new data pipeline within some of these systems so we can get the value, other applications within the organization can get value out of it. So from that perspective, engaging them right at the start is absolutely key, and asking those questions about what are the key outcomes that you desire out of this work that you want us to do, and keep iterating on that, because they might start with one, and as you keep building, that will evolve as well, because they might understand a bit more and tweak what the outcomes they're looking for. So having that conversation is as early as possible is important. And having that conversation continuously is also important, because you want to be mindful of if there are any changes, if there are any pivots you need to make or they need to make, you have that continuous dialogue to ensure you have that space to explore it.
All right. You've really presented the book in a way that I now feel like I want to go back to read it. And you've made it interesting for me to just pick it up and start reading immediately. If anyone wanted to start understanding a lot of the stuff you've talked about at TaxTop and the metrics, what's the process? What's the approach? Can we just go onto your website and start assessing the metrics?
Yeah. So Flow Framework is available for everyone. I mean, TaskTop is a product company, so we focus on products. We have an integration product, and we have a value stream product, which all brings all of this to life. But the Flow Framework and anything in the book is available for everyone. So there's a website called flowframework.org, which I would ask you to explore. There are quite a lot of articles and details out there. There's a blog within TaskTop. You might be able to get quite a lot of information from that as well. And the book itself is quite useful, but I think flowframework.org is a good starting point. The other thing you might be able to do, and I'll see if I can find you some links, is any talks around these. There have been a few from DevOps Enterprise Summit and also at the SAFE Summit, I think last year and the year before. So there are some talks which talk about some of these concepts. I didn't get a chance to talk about the type of work and how you extract that out, the how we get to a point where you can identify features, defects, risks, and debt. I think that's also key, and that's quite very well explored in the book. And I'm sure you'll find some good links in flowframework.org as well. If anyone has any questions afterwards as well, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be absolutely happy to answer any questions as well if you think about something afterwards.
Well, Laksh, personally, I know it's impossible. I can't say it's impossible to measure intangible metrics. Is this something you guys look at whilst looking at flow metrics?
So could you explain which in particular are you thinking about when you're thinking about intangibles?
So intangibles like staff happiness, customer happiness. I know we do survey to look at whether they're happy or not. Is it something that can be incorporated in the talk you've presented?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to quickly jump to this slide here. So when it comes to the outcomes that you're looking at, it's not just the value delivered, but you're also looking at things like cost, quality, and happiness. So happiness is, in case of happiness there, it's not just focused on external customers, but internal teams. In fact, the book focuses on internal happiness. Happy teams are a leading indicator that everything is being developed the right way. If you see your happiness go down, it suggests that there are some problems. A lot of times it could be around not being able to focus on things like technical debt within the teams, right? Yeah. So one of the ways within TaskTop we measure happiness is we do an internal quarterly survey. We call it an employee survey. And every value stream is included in it. Every team is included in it. And we review it on a quarterly basis. And it's one of the metrics that we align towards and we actively focus on. So employee happiness is one of the key things to measure because they do correlate quite directly with what's happening within the organization, the system, the value stream itself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much on that. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. What about risk? Is it incorporated in the measures you are looking at?
Yeah. So the way risks come in is risks are typically anything that their revenue protection work, anything that is focused on making sure you're focused on things like security, compliance, and so forth. So a good example would be if you have a SaaS product and you're focused on SOC 2 compliance, that would be something that you would work, that would be a risk related work. You want to be able to, so when you think about flow distribution, you want to be able to allocate your capacity across all four of them. You don't want to be focused just on features and that you're disregarding risks and debt. So you need to be able to make sure at a business level, they understand why you need to be focusing on risk-related work, right? So if you look at an example, not that one, this chart here, which talks about how much risk work is happening. The yellow pieces there, they're the risk work. And that level might be okay for this particular product, but to be consciously looking at and being able to work on it is important, and giving that visibility to the business is important. And it's the same thing with debt as well. The business needs to have visibility when it comes to the debt work that you're doing internally, so they understand the impact that working on debt will have within technology and how it can accelerate feature work in future. Because that's something that is usually missed. To be able to elevate that and show that in relation to the business outcomes is key. So they have that ambient awareness of it.
Laksh, I think I've got more questions, but we've run out of time, and I would like to invite you for a future session.
Yeah, absolutely.
A topic of interest as well. I was nearly going to ask about DevOps, but before we go, why not put DevOps on the as a question? How does Flow Metrics look at DevOps from a team to customer perspective?
Yeah, so everything we do, and you could ask the same thing about everything you do within Agile as well. DevOps is focused on everything around deployment and release. You do need to focus on that. The more optimization, the more automations you bring in that area, the better. What you're doing with applying DevOps practices is making your deployment and release more efficient. What tends to happen when you just focus on DevOps is that you're removing bottlenecks from that area, but that's just one piece of the entire technology development cycle, right? So if you go back, if I could go back to that one, so most of the DevOps work tends to happen between the release and the operate piece. What it tends to drop from that list is everything you're doing on the creation side. Now, the creation side is where a lot of the agile practices are focused on, and perhaps a little bit on the ideation side, but not quite all the way to the end. So when you apply value stream management, it's bringing in agile practices and DevOps practices together, but with a customer lens. So what it's doing is it's sort of making sure that you're aligning all of them together towards the customer, which still happens individually as well. It's just that the focus areas are too narrow in those cases. So you do need to look a little bit beyond to look at the entire system. So that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thanks so much for coming to this slide. When I initially saw it, I realized I had so many questions, but you covered it. And I know I would like to invite you again to talk more about this particular slide on creating the DevOps mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would, in the interest of time, I would like to say a big thank you for coming to share knowledge. And the knowledge you've shared, sometimes I hear it and it's dry, but you've made it so insightful. I can still hear all the stories you've shared, and it will be a real pleasure to welcome you again. And I look forward to bringing you back to talk more about what you've shared and DevOps. From everyone here, we would like to say a big thank you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. And the video is recorded. Folks, if you have any questions, if you have things you want to ask Lash, is online. You can contact Lash via LinkedIn.
Yep.
She will accept your questions and she would spend some time giving you answers on what she's covered. And we would like to say the video will also be made available for you to watch, and we'll be sending emails. And thank you as well for joining today's session, and you've made the session a wonderful session. Let's have a wonderful day and see you at the next event where UM talks about stories in an agile environment. So I would like to see you all join when we talk about how to make storytelling a part of your agile development process. Let's have a wonderful day and see you all soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Lash.
Bye, everyone.